A guy sneaks into his own restaurant. Looks like he's just craving a good steak. But what he's really after is the truth about a betrayal. And what he ends up finding is the brother he hasn't seen in years. This isn't just a story about food. It's about family, pride, and second chances. And once the truth comes out, nothing will ever be the same. If this touching story moved you, don't forget to like the video. For more emotional and inspiring stories based on real life, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. I'm here to share many more stories with you. James Anderson was the founder of one of America's most beloved steakhouse chains. Years ago, he opened his first restaurant in a small town, and it quickly turned into a huge success. His name became legendary in the world of food. Anderson's Steakhouse now operates in 3 different states with dozens of employees. Its flagship location in New York is a go-to spot for celebrities and food lovers alike. But every success story has a darker side. Lately, things hadn't been going so well. Some comments on social media really hit James hard. The food's still amazing, but the service is awful. The waiters don't care, and the vibe just isn't the same. It's lost its soul, feels like just another chain now. To James, these weren't just criticisms, they were warnings. Because to him, these restaurants weren't just a business. They were a living piece of his dream. One day, James made up his mind. He wasn't just going to listen to the comments, he was going to see the truth for himself. He decided to put aside his name, his past fame, even his comfortable lifestyle, and secretly visit his own restaurant. That day, he hung up his suit. Instead, he threw on a simple shirt, a pair of jeans, and a plain cap. The flashy luxury car that usually turned heads, he left it in the garage. He hit the road in his assistant's regular old sedan. And the reservation? He made it under a name no one would recognize, Jack Thompson. No one would guess he was the legendary founder of Anderson's Steakhouse. At least, that's what he hoped. For the first time, he was going to walk into his restaurant as a total stranger. To see it with fresh eyes, to feel every detail just like a regular customer. As soon as he stepped through the door, a familiar warmth hit him. The lighting was still soft, those cozy yellow tones wrapping around the guests like a blanket. The smell of grilled meat drifting from the kitchen pulled James straight into a wave of memories. On the walls, the same black and white photos, awards, and customer notes he'd hung up years ago were still there. At first glance, everything looked just like it used to. From the outside, nothing seemed to have changed. A friendly hostess greeted him with a smile and led him to a nice table by the window. As James sat down, his eyes scanned the room, the staff, the faces of the guests, the overall vibe. He was observing everything, while silently remembering how he once ran this place with passion, pouring his heart into every little detail. A waiter handed him the menu, and James didn't hesitate. He ordered the new chef's special, bourbon-glazed ribeye steak, topped with a blue cheese crust and caramelized onions. It was a newer addition to the menu. James wanted to see how it tasted, how it looked, and most of all, how it was served. But the real test hadn't even begun. The question now was, how would the staff treat this man they believed was just another customer? The moment he took the first bite, he stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he held his fork midair for a second. Because this wasn't just good. It was incredible. The steak was cooked to absolute perfection. The deep, rich flavor of the bourbon sauce balanced beautifully with the sharpness of the blue cheese crust. The caramelized onions added a gentle sweetness, a kind of elegant warmth to the whole dish. James couldn't help but smile. Whoever made this really loves what they do, he thought to himself. But then, something felt off. He glanced toward the kitchen. The usual sounds, the lively shouting, the fast footsteps, the rhythm of a kitchen in full swing, they were missing. No organized chaos, no energy, just silence, almost mechanical. The presentation was perfect, the flavor flawless, but the soul, the passion, it seemed like it was only on the plate. It hadn't spread to the rest of the place. And that's when a question crept into James's mind. Who made this dish? And why are they creating something this amazing in such a quiet, lifeless kitchen? While he was at the restaurant, James didn't just focus on the food, he was watching the people, too. Some of the staff, when going in and out of the kitchen, seemed to avoid making eye contact with the chef. Sometimes, they'd whisper to each other as they walked away from him. There were cold looks, unfinished sentences. These weren't things James could ignore. He overheard a few quiet comments that only made his suspicions grow stronger. He's the new chef, but he hasn't really clicked with anyone. Yeah, he cooks well, but there's something off about him. Sometimes he acts like he owns the place. There was definitely tension behind the scenes, and Chef Daniel seemed to be right in the middle of it. A few days later, James came back with a different plan. Wearing the same cap and casual clothes, he placed a takeout order through the restaurant's online system. While waiting for his order to be ready, he sat in the small waiting area near the register. It was the perfect spot, right in the middle of everything. The servers passing by, the line between the kitchen and the dining room. And right there, the curtain lifted. A short but sharp conversation between two staff members revealed more than they probably meant to. Daniel still acts like he owns the place. Just cook the food, we don't need anything else from him. Yeah, but he keeps messing with the menu, making changes, questioning the rules. He's driving us crazy. James's eyes locked on a single point in the distance. The question inside him was only getting louder. Who is this Daniel? Just a chef? Or something more? Just then, James caught the sound of two cashiers whispering nearby. Ashley and Chloe were huddled behind the order screen, glancing around with lowered voices. He couldn't hear everything, but what he did hear hit like a punch. Tyler's plan is working, Ashley said, smirking. Daniel's either gonna quit or finally get fired. I swapped out his special salt last week. You should have seen his face. Chloe giggled, looked down at her phone, and added, I delayed one of the orders by 10 minutes. Customer complained, and guess who got blamed? Daniel. James felt a tightness in his chest. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some harmless misunderstanding. It was a coordinated sabotage. Daniel's isolation, the cold stares, the quiet brilliance in the kitchen, it all made sense now. And at the center of it all, Tyler. Probably the manager. Or maybe the head server. Someone with power. And clearly, someone using that power to crush Daniel. James's fist clenched without thinking. The restaurant he'd poured his soul into had become a stage for petty games and silent cruelty. And maybe, just maybe, the best person in that building was also the one being left the most alone. James was frozen. The whispers from the cashiers. The games, the sabotage. The darkness creeping through his restaurant was finally showing its face. But the person behind it all was someone far bigger than he expected. Travis, head chef of Capital Grill, a rival restaurant chain. Years ago, he was James's greatest competitor, his biggest fear. And now, he was rotting Anderson's Steakhouse from the inside, using former employees as his pawns. The plan was clever. Isolate Daniel. Bury his talent. Make him look like the problem. The silence in the kitchen was no longer just cold. It was whispering betrayal. But the real shock hadn't even come yet. James made his way to the office. He wanted to look at the employee files like an insider. He opened the folder labeled Daniel Walker. As he flipped through the pages, his eyes froze on one corner. Date of birth, place of birth, middle school diploma. Then, at the bottom corner of the form, full name, Daniel James Anderson. James forgot to breathe. His fingers tightened around the folder as a sharp, familiar pain rose in his chest. This couldn't be a coincidence. He closed his eyes. And just like that, he was pulled back in time. 7 years. 7 long years without speaking. They had gone their separate ways, different dreams, silent pride, and distance. And now, his own brother had walked into his restaurant. Quietly, humbly, taking on the toughest job, doing it brilliantly, and getting sabotaged from within. He never said a word, never asked for anything, just did his job, and he did it alone. James's eyes filled with tears, a storm of anger, regret, and a love that had waited far too long. Daniel had earned his place in that kitchen. He applied online, using their mother's maiden name Walker on his resume. He didn't ask for favors. He didn't want special treatment or recognition from the past. He just wanted to be judged as a chef, to carve his own path, on his own terms. But now, in his brother's restaurant, without even saying his name, he was silently fighting back against sabotage from the inside. And still, he hadn't given up. For James, the nights had become sleepless. After seeing the name in the file, he started putting all the pieces together. He went through the restaurant's security footage, and there it was clear as day. Ashley, tampering with Daniel's special spice blend. Chloe, accidentally hiding order slips on the back shelf. And the most shocking of all, former manager Brian, meeting Travis in the shadows by the back exit, taking a thick envelope full of cash. This wasn't just competition anymore. It was a knife to the very heart of the restaurant. The next morning, For the first time in years, James put on his suit and walked through the doors of Anderson's Steakhouse not as a stranger, but as the founder. This time, he wasn't hiding. And this time, he wasn't staying silent. He gathered the entire staff. The restaurant fell into a hush. The lights dimmed, and a screen lit up. Security footage began to play. One scene after another unfolded before everyone's eyes: the swapped spice jar, the delayed order slips. The envelope of cash passed from Travis to Brian at the back exit. Ashley's face went pale. Chloe's hands trembled. Brian looked away. The rest of the staff stood frozen, unsure what to say or think. Then James spoke, his voice firm, steady, but filled with emotion. This restaurant isn't just a business to me. It's a story of hard work, of family, and no one hurts my family. Ashley, Chloe, Brian, and a few others. They were fired on the spot. None of them said a word, because the truth was right there for all to see. James turned back to the room and took a deep breath. His eyes moved slowly across every face in the crowd. His voice was steady but full of emotion. This restaurant was built on honesty. Every bit of effort here matters. But anyone who plays games with people's work, who mocks what we build here, doesn't belong. The room was silent. Not a single sound of cutlery, no whispers, nothing. Every eye was on James. Then his gaze landed on one person, Daniel. For the first time in years, their eyes met. No words passed between them, but everything was said. After a long pause, James spoke again, this time softer, gentler. "Can I speak with you?" Privately. James took a deep breath and turned to his brother, speaking slowly. "You're the best chef this restaurant has, Daniel. If you want to stay, the door is wide open. But this time, under your real name. You've earned it." Daniel stayed quiet for a moment. Years of silence weighed on his shoulders, but in his eyes, there was something unexpected: peace. Then he gave a small nod and smiled. "If I still carry the family name, then yes, not as Carter, but as Anderson." And from that day on, a new name appeared on the menu: Daniel Anderson, head chef. The restaurant quickly found its rhythm again. Customers started coming back. Online reviews lit up. The flavor is back better than ever. The new head chef is doing wonders. But in truth, it wasn't new talent. It was talent that had finally been seen. Now, everyone could feel Daniel's touch, in the food, in the service, in the atmosphere. One day, James walked through the doors again, this time with their mother by his side. Daniel adjusted his apron, smiled, and came to greet them. "By the way, Capital Grill sales are down 30%, he said with a grin. James winked, let out a hearty laugh, and replied, "Anyone who fights talent ends up fighting themselves." All three of them laughed. The past between the two brothers had finally become part of the future. And in that restaurant, it wasn't just about food anymore. It was about forgiveness, rebirth, and family. Laughter filled the restaurant. Happy conversations floated from table to table. The sizzling sound from the grill played like the rhythm of a life reborn. But that night, the loudest sound within those walls was a family coming back together. Because sometimes, the most powerful recipe isn't made with just spices, but with forgiveness, with love, and with a brand new beginning of us. If this touching story spoke to your heart, don't forget to like the video. For more emotional and powerful stories inspired by real life, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. I'm here to share many more stories with you.